ahead and start. And welcome. I am Rob Felber. I am chair of the Entrepreneurs Association at John Carroll. So welcome. A couple other notable folks here that, in addition to all being notable, but Dawn Winkle is our executive director. And I see my co-chair in programming, Andrew Connors, welcome. And co-chairs of membership, Brendan Breen and Mark Rashan. Mark Rashan, extending congratulations, has also been recently named the vice chair of the Entrepreneurs Association. So congratulations, Mark, and welcome to our other staff and longtime members. The young, handsomer gentleman with the hat is Michael Trebilcock. And I'm going to do just a really brief introduction of Michael, who is the managing director in the Office of Development at MCPC and our speaker today. He hails education-wise from the University of South Florida, where he got a Bachelor of General Studies, Environmental Science and Policy, and also a communications degree in sociology from the University of Washington. With that, a couple of quick housekeeping. We are going to have our presentation by Michael, and then any Q&A. And there should still be time to do some networking breakouts, either in one big room or we'll do small breakouts. Trying to do our best to get to some of the networking that we're missing from being in person. Also, a couple other things. The website has been updated at jcuea.org. And on that, you will see an events tab. And on December 16th, we will be having Scott Snyder, who is with the Exit Planning Institute. And I'm trying to pull up his title, Building an Attractive and Ready Company in 2021. So mark your calendars. You can actually go in right now, RSVP, and get the Zoom links. Again, that's December 16th. We will have additional announcements for our holiday party, which is going to be virtual in December. And then we've started to round out January, February, March, April schedule for other speakers. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Michael and welcome on behalf of the Entrepreneurs Association.
Thanks, Rob. Nice to see everyone here today. I recognize some of the names, but hopefully I have some interesting things to share, but definitely jump in with any questions that you come up with along the way here. Hopefully, I think everyone here is pretty much local, so MCPC has been around long enough that most people know at least our acronym and some of our offices at least, but it's not too often that I run into people that know exactly what we do. We're a B2B organization in the IT industry and do a lot of cybersecurity type activities. So sometimes it's kind of a lost on just the average person what we're up to over here. So I thought that I would share a little bit of that before jumping into kind of our recent experiences over the last several months, which I think has been pretty interesting for everybody. And then maybe some of the advancements we've been trying to make throughout the last several years in terms of taking ourselves from a very traditional reseller organization to a bit more of controlling our own destiny and creating our own offerings that don't necessarily rely on manufacturers like HP and Apple and those guys. So with that being said, I will try and share a few things here. Hopefully it works. Okay. How about that? Are we seeing this? Good. Okay. I mean, obviously with the pandemic and everything going on, we don't have the ability to do our typical show and tell, which we love to do. So all of our facilities, which we have one out by the airport, which you see on the screen here, we have one down in Old Brooklyn, and we have our sales, marketing, and operations center on Euclid Avenue. All of them are built to really to bring in our clients and talk about what we do and show the life cycle of technology that we're dealing with. Oftentimes we work with very large organizations, and so the decisions are not being made by a single person, they're being made by large groups of people. And so, you know, getting everybody comfortable on the same page and understanding all of our processes and you know, how we do things is important to that whole sales funnel and kind of generating that kind of attention. So we like to do the show and tell. So we created kind of a virtual tour here that has gotten us through the last couple of months at least. We'll go through really this facility out by the airport. We call it Sky Park, and that's really the flagship facility at MCPC. It's really makes up about 80 to 90% of the services we provide, and then everything else in all of our other facilities and other locations around the region are basically supporting facilities to this main operation. So I'll share some of that with you, and we can talk about the rest as we go. Yeah, right there behind the IX Center, which is sadly no longer. But we run, it's about 80,000 square feet out here, and we run all types of technology distribution and configuration out of that facility. So when you think of MCPC, basically you can think of endpoint devices. So anything from your laptops, tablets, and phones to medical carts and small drones and some IoT devices and sensors. So we really get into the full gamut of endpoint technology, because there is a lot of kind of ancillary services and things that need to be answered for when you have a physical piece of technology. Software is, you know, incredibly scalable because there is no distribution factor to that. It's just immediately ready to be copied. Physical technology is much more intensive when it comes to the logistics around it, and then also the configuration and the you know, the asset management of all of that. So that's really where MCPC is extremely valuable, is when there's an endpoint device and there's some type of service that needs to be done to that, or some type of personal handling. So a little bit of an outline of the facility. We have about 130,000 square feet split between warehousing, configuration lab, and some offices here. The configure about 350,000 devices a year. And then it outlines down here some of the more traditional things we're working with: your PCs, laptops, tablets. Do a lot with custom kiosks, medical carts, name any hospital in the region, the Great Lakes region, and then typically MCPC will work on either their medical carts or their physician devices, so laptops and tablets and phones that they're carrying around the hospitals. Security is a huge component of what we do. So obviously we're managing a lot of data when it comes to our corporate clients. At this facility especially, we're typically imaging their equipment with their proprietary software and configurations. So all of that data is very sensitive. So we're housing that and trusted with keeping that secure and private. So our configuration area, the lab, is only accessible by people working in that area. Those people are background checked and registered. And then all of the zones here are require different levels of security and restrictions. So like when I walk into this facility, I can get into the offices, and then if I were to go into any of the other zones besides zone 1, I need a partner with me that has access to that area. So I need chaperones almost anywhere I go there. Lots of project management and consulting. We call the life cycle of devices chain of custody, and that's really rooted in the security emphasis, because we are basically not just managing the physical device, but all of the data that device is generating. So over a 2.5, 3-year, 5-year life cycle, that device is processing a lot of data, and there are certain updates that happen to the device, or service calls that happen to the device that we're tracking at a level that, if they were to get breached by a cybersecurity threat, we could pinpoint that down to the exact device that it happened to. Maybe that device was missing certain updates or patches that would have protected it from the breach, or something, or it connected to an unsecured network at some point. So really all of the chain of custody is rooted in being able to have an audit trail going back to specific devices and the posture of that device. So we process a lot of equipment out of this facility. So one of the things that was a big effort here over the last several years was, and part of kind of the modernization conversation, was taking really an operation that was very custom and turning that into something that was highly structured. So the way this facility operates is very much like a manufacturing facility. So we have the equipment that is stored here. Typically, this is owned by customers already, and it's just being stored here until we configure it somehow and deploy it to the customer. They're separated into very specific warehouses. So, and even depending on the customer, we're very often integrated with their inventory management system. So the warehouse that they have at MCPC's facility also shows up in their records as a Progressive warehouse, for example, or a Timken warehouse. So they have that. We have that level of integration with most of our customers. One of the big efforts around taking things from custom to structured was we needed to go through an activity to basically skew up all of our services. So go through a big structuring exercise to take a custom kind of one-off solution and turn it into something that could be skewed, put into our system, and then, become highly repeatable. One of those things was decontamination and UVC lights. So you can see here, we've outfitted a couple of rooms at that facility with these high-powered, extremely dangerous lights that will sunburn you in a matter of minutes, and they're very potent UVC lights. But what these will do, and the service that we've put together here over the last couple of months, has been taking in end user equipment that might have been in people's homes, or might have been broken and they're getting a new device, or it might be a new employee that was just hired and they're being issued a new device. Before anything leaves our facility, it goes through this room to get cleaned, and then it gets packaged up from there and then goes to the end user. So that way we're not transmitting any germs or contamination from our facility or our employees that are handling devices out into the world. So this was a safety measure that we took, but also something that our customers see as really valuable. So we're constantly making these types of changes to accommodate for what's happening in the world. This is a mobile version of that exact room. So we partnered with another local organization, Crestcore. It's out of Mentor, Ohio. They build these catering cabinets essentially for commercial kitchens. They work a lot with casinos and school districts and universities, and this is what you would see in a Wendy's kitchen or anything like that, where they're heating things up or storing things at temperature or cooking things. So we took a model, which you see here, of those ovens. We put some controls and governors around the heating in there. So it's not humid heat, it's dry heat. It only goes up to about 130 degrees. And then we installed smaller versions of those UV lights. And so basically what this does is it runs a 15-minute cycle with lights on and runs a 15-minute cycle heating up the devices that you put in there. And when they come out of there, they're all but sterile. And I wouldn't say sterile because it's not an FDA registered device, but it cleans technology inside and out. So that was another unique project that we launched into back in March at this point. But been very successful. We've had some pretty interesting contracts with local banks and things like that that are trying to figure out the best way to bring employees back to the office, or the best processes to implement at the office that keeps things safe and clean and doesn't use excessive amounts of chemicals and things like that. The configuration zone is extremely important. So this is where all the high touch activities are happening. So all of our engineers and technicians are working in this area and taking equipment out of the warehouse, putting images on it, or configuring it, or building medical carts from the ground up, literally. And so it's been, this is kind of where the magic happens, essentially, in terms of getting things from the state that they come into our facility, which is often right from the manufacturer. There's no image on it. And then getting it into a state that, it's even connected to the end user's network. It already has their credentials loaded into it and all the business software that they need. So it really shows up at the end user's desk or at their home, ready to log on and use, which is a huge component of the value we provide to organizations that are managing very large quantities of devices. So that's an image of what that room is like. So you got benches and technicians working, often 2 shifts, sometimes 3 shifts. We'll work weekends, but this is where throughput is extremely important. So this is where basically we become a manufacturer of services. So that has been really a shift that we've gone through over the last 6 or 7 years. So prior to the operation that we run now, MCPC was an IT reseller. So we would partner with HP, Lenovo, Apple, Dell, Microsoft, Cisco, any of those big manufacturers, and we buy their product, we mark it up 25%, and we sell it to whoever the buyer is. We did that since about 1991. That was the model. We became top tier partners with HP, with Microsoft, with Cisco. We really were a top reseller in the United States when it came to those OEMs. But what we lost is really our own identity. So we became no more than the equivalent of a car dealership, Mercedes-Benz car dealership, or a BMW dealership, where our value was the manufacturer's value. We didn't really have much value of our own. And what started to happen was the margins on this equipment started to decrease significantly. So back in maybe 2000, 2005, you're making 15 to 20 points on a PC. Now you're lucky to make 8 or 9. Most of the time it's 4 to 6. And so at the volumes we're pushing, sometimes 50,000 at a time, 100,000 at a time, you can still make some good money off that. But the really the many resellers have taken the model of layering services on top of that. So, instead of just selling an HP laptop to, company XYZ, we're now selling the HP laptop plus a configuration service for $2 and a warehousing service for $4, and then a white glove distribution service for $6. And so all of a sudden you got an $800 device with 4% margin, and then $60 in services at 70% margin attached to each device. So that's really enabled a lot of our growth over the last 15 years, was layering in services. What becomes challenging, and I'll give you a new picture here. What becomes challenging is that the services get very custom. You approach large organizations, and things happen their way, and so we would bend into a pretzel to make things happen for them. And it took basically this operation, and it started to become very challenging to make these engagements profitable because of how custom they were. So what we started doing about 5 or 6 years ago was turning those services, which are very often exactly the same, customer to customer, and turning them into SKUs, and then turning those SKUs into bundles, and then turning those bundles into an offering, and then turning that offering into something that we train our sales team on. So that way, when they sell for example, a work from home offering, we know that that includes these 6 bundles of services, which is made up of these 24 SKUs. And so the technician here at the lab that is performing those, they have an exact menu of SKUs to go through. It happens the same way every time. But ultimately, depending on how those SKUs and those bundles are structured, the pricing engineering and the sales kind of economics behind all of that it becomes very repeatable. So that's why we often refer to this place as our factory, because we're churning through SKU after SKU after SKU. A lot of that was, a really easy concept to kind of propose and understand, but in practice was years and years and years of piecing that together. And even to this day, we're still challenged to take a customer engagement that seems very unique at face value and convert it into a highly structured operation on our end. So certain things like this, some kitting solutions. So we do this all the time. This would be basically looks like this is a work from home solution. So we develop a custom box. We source all of the different components that would go in there. So maybe there's a PC, there's a docking station, there's a headset, a mouse, screen protectors, cases, all of those individual components that are made up or that make up kind of the kit. We're managing the whole supply chain of all of that, and then putting them onto this custom solution. But that has become an exercise in, okay, how do we take kitting and turn that into a SKUable structured service, so that so that we can have good understanding for all the different people and man hours and rates that are involved in creating that kit, and start to create more efficiency with getting that done, instead of it being just a custom all hands on deck project every time something like that happens. So we created. Sure.
Quick question. As I'm thinking of COVID in March and these kittings and these home boxes, how much were the disruptions in supply chains affecting your ability to pivot quickly? Because I know there wasn't a PC to be had, mid-March. Maybe you had.
Yeah. So I mean, it basically so I mentioned earlier, Dell, Lenovo, HP, Apple, those guys were shut down. You could not find any tier 1 equipment on the market, and you couldn't find any used tier 1 equipment on the market. So when we had something big that started happening back in February, March due to COVID was all of these large school districts are going 100% remote learning. Cleveland schools is still 100% or mostly remote learning at this point. The schools could not get their hands on enough equipment to issue each student a device. So it became, like you're saying, a huge supply chain issue. A lot of corporations, just due to tightening up on budgets and everything, they paused a lot of the new rollouts or refreshes of equipment. And so I think they fared all right with, because they already had all of that. But the schools were going from Cleveland Metropolitan School District, as an example, went from having maybe 10 or 15,000 laptop computers or endpoints in their fleet, because they weren't being used by every student every day, to now they have over 40,000 devices in their fleet, because that's every student is 1-to-1 device to student ratio. So for them, they were scraping the bottom of the barrel to find whatever they could, and almost every school system across the country was doing very much the same thing. So something we did back in March was we started a relationship with a contract manufacturer that was able to basically source the same exact components as a tier 1 manufacturer like HP, but custom build us a off-brand device, so to speak. So we basically created our own brand of laptop computer for the exact purpose of issuing those to students and school districts, because the components were available, in some of them lower quality components, some of them just equivalent components. But what was happening was the manufacturing overseas in the United States was completely shut down. So we found a manufacturer that was able to produce laptop computers that were just as good in most ways as a tier 1 manufacturer, but it's led to us having several really big contracts with public school districts, just because they needed the availability. We had a relatively low cost answer, and we could also support their fleet that has tripled or quadrupled in size sometimes. So yeah, definitely COVID has had a huge impact on just the supply chain, and it's caused a lot of delays, but definitely I think a lot of creativity has come out of it, and in that, I think that whether it's work from home or the telehealth or the remote learning, I think a lot of that is accelerating some uses of technology that has always been readily available, but we haven't widely adopted a lot of it. Kind of the virtual settings of everything is a good example of that as well. This is a large project that we've been doing for a number of years with Medicare and Medicaid in the state of Ohio, and it's soon to be expanding into, I think, Pennsylvania and Indiana, and one other state out west, I believe. But basically, we're providing cell phones or smartphones to Medicare patients, and so that when their care provider comes in to do the regular checkup with them, this is basically an electronic visit verification. So the care provider has to sign off that they went through, item XYZ, and then the patient also has to sign off that they did indeed go through all of the things they were supposed to. One of the biggest issues that Medicare, Medicaid has is the fraud involved with it. So they're bleeding millions and millions of dollars just because some of these providers would go in and not really do what they were supposed to do, or they wouldn't go in the patient's home at all and just sign off that they did. So this was a solution that we came up with a couple of partners to provide an electronic way to verify. It's not a perfect system, but it's 90% better than it was. And And it's very quickly expanding across several states, and it's one of the bigger projects that we have going on to date. So another very basic thing, we're eliminating dunnage. So you order 10,000 PCs and they come with 10,000 boxes and 10,000 wrappers for the power cords, and all sorts of things like that. That creates a huge amount of waste. So MCPC, because we're receiving all of that equipment and processing it and working on it, we remove all of the dunnage, recycle that in a responsible way, and then as things show up on site to the users, they're ready to use, and not coming in all these boxes. We have a high security zone, so security is not just something that we are consulting on with our clients, but we're also providing areas where sensitive devices or data can be stored. So this actually most often happens with litigation holds. So if there is if a device or data on certain hard drives is involved in litigation, we're providing an area for it to be stored and monitored. And so that's become a component of what we can offer. Got to scan your eyeballs to get in there. I think there's 2 or 3 people that are allowed in that room. Yeah, and so that's really it. But I think that gives kind of a good overview of what MCPC is currently doing, and the operation that we have. I think there's a lot that we have adapted over the last several months. The UV is a great example of that. Working with public school districts is another example of that. There's always seems to be something new on the horizon that we're dealing with or developing to answer some need for a customer. I think the biggest epiphany that we have had in recent years was taking those kind of opportunities that just kind of are right in front of us and exciting, and turning them into repeatable offerings. And we've been able to do that because of the effort we put into structuring all of our services. So now we look at a custom engagement as, okay, is this something that maybe others would probably want, or that there's a market that we could specifically target if we created an offering around this? So going from a custom build shop to a highly structured, well-oiled machine has allowed us to do that and kind of think about the world a little bit differently. Some of the things that have come up due to those advancements is basically a growth strategy that we'd never been able to accomplish before. So taking our model of structure and skewed offerings and basically licensing out that that proprietary information and structure to other value-added resellers. So our kind of segment of the industry would be categorized as far as value-added resellers. There's probably 70,000 of them throughout the United States, and some of them are 2-3 person shops. Some of them are 2-3 times the size of MCPC. But what they all struggle with is that they're at the very end, the tail end of the supply chain, that last mile between the manufactured device and the end user, which is really one of the more difficult places to be, because that's kind of the end of the tail that's always moving around. So the end user is always demanding something different. So that value-added reseller has to be extremely adaptable. We think our model of structuring the offerings and skewing all of those different services, possible services, is a good way to meet the needs that are always changing, but always do it in a way that's structured and predictable. So there's some, pretty exciting things that we have on the horizon in terms of how we're going to expand over the coming years. COVID has definitely been a challenge for us, but I think we've seen a lot of technology companies, internet companies that are doing extremely well during the pandemic. I wouldn't say that we're doing extremely well and thriving, but we're absolutely making the best of the situation, and we're going to get through it and do all right here. But I think it's taken a lot of years to put us in the position to do that and have the right structures in place. And so I think that kind of covers the overview of MCPC, and I'd love to talk about any things that are on your guys' mind or questions you might have.
Great. Well, thank you, Michael. We're going to open up for questions. And, coming from a standing school board member that was 2/3 way through our 5-year one-to-one plan, and having to go find 300-400 more Chromebooks, I'm impressed by what you were able to put together. Productizing your service and turning them into SKUs has always fascinated me. And I think many of us on this call have various services that, you try to, turn into some type of skewed product. So we're going to open up for questions. And then as a reminder, we'll break into separate groups for some networking. So what questions do we have for Michael? There's got to be some out there.
Hey, Mike, Bob Slopko from Case Western.
Hey, Bob.
I love that you went to the UV component pretty quick. We've got some labs when I was involved with deploying equipment, and they never wanted to get extended warranties on their Dell computers because they said that, well, you can't have a technician come in here. Anything that leaves this lab has to be incinerated. So a little bit different environment. I had a question on, and maybe you touched on it, those big devices where you're have at a high temperature or a higher temperature. Were those manufactured specifically for you?
Yeah, so we went through a couple of iterations of prototypes, I guess you could say. And so the first thing we did was we bought a catering cabinet, catering oven from Crestcore is the manufacturer.
Yeah.
And we just retrofitted it ourselves. But what we did for the production model is we worked with their engineers and we designed a completely commercial grade UVC cabinet, so that it includes their heating technology, but also includes the advancements and kind of design that we added with the UV lights and the different control retrofits and everything. So yeah, that's a completely custom built product there, but it's commercial grade now. The first one we built was pretty janky.
Yeah, I was wondering, looking at it, I was like, I wonder if that's Crestcore, because for folks on a call, Crestcore is you may know of them. They're out in Mentor. They're a very high-end oven and refrigeration company. And I worked with Rio, who is, I don't know if he's still there, but he came to Case. Yeah. Okay, Rio. Yeah, Rio de Janeiro is the guy's name. And we were looking to see if there's anything that they could make a case. This is a couple years ago, that you need to hold the temperature for a long time, like in experimentation, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And also for people on the call, like they make the holding ovens for the breadsticks at Olive Garden, and I think maybe the holding ovens for. Anyways, they're really, really good at that. It's good to see, two Cleveland companies come together like that. Thank you. Great summary.
Other questions for Michael?
Hey, Mike, Dave Clifford, how are you?
Hey, Dave, how you doing?
It's been a while. How's your mom and dad?
Doing well. Yeah.
Good. I don't know if you know this or not, but your dad hired me many years ago to do a retained search, and I placed Andy Jones there as the VP of Sales many, many years ago.
Yeah. Andy's doing just fine.
He's doing well. He's doing well.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is really around artificial intelligence. Are you looking at getting into any other businesses outside of where you currently are? And if so, what would your growth plans be?
Yeah. Yeah, I think a great question. And one of the things that the big moves we made a couple of years ago was to get into asset management. And so IT asset management is this kind of small dark corner of the technology world that basically is aggregating all of the data around endpoint devices or really any piece of technology. Large organizations, imagine maybe a big manufacturer that has dozens of locations around the world, thousands of employees, thousands of devices, and managing what model everybody has, what licenses they have deployed, what configuration is on the device, and what business software they have and the licenses behind that. All of that becomes a huge burden and actually a huge risk when it comes to the audit exposure to all of that. So when basically the true up is happening with the license providers, you can basically be on the hook for a lot of money if you're overusing the licenses that you were subscribed. And so that whole asset management corner that we've been evolving for the last couple of years has taken us really deep into the data management world and sort of what we have right in front of us. We're very much built around throughput and high volumes and efficiencies. It wasn't until asset management that the thought crossed our mind to even say, okay, we have all of this data that is seemingly useless. It's what model HP do you have? And does it have a camera? Where's the microphone located? All these useless pieces of information. But we also have so much valuable data around the usage and the types of configurations, and basically we're able to profile different companies and different industries and how they best use technology because of all the data that we have around their technology usage. So that's absolutely in our future, not in the next year or 6 months, but we're very quickly moving in that direction just because of the masses of data that we're starting to collect. So the only way to process through that and make value of it is through artificial intelligence and some of those data science elements that are pretty new to us, but we'll have to get familiar with it pretty quick, I imagine.
Okay, great.
Other questions?
Hey, Michael, Brendan Breen here.
Hey, Brendan.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Question that I don't know if you have the answer to, but I'm really wondering about hardware trends. 20 years ago, everybody had a desktop. Now nobody has a desktop. Tablets seem to have difference of opinions on whether or not they're here for the long run or not. I mean, phones are getting bigger, laptops are getting smaller. Does that leave room for tablets in the world? Are you guys seeing anything as far as your customers ordering their order changes happening around hardware?
Yeah, and I think it's very different, the consumer world versus the corporate world. And I don't think that, and we're not seeing any trends away from laptops in the corporate world. I think that will be a pillar of how work is done. That will even increase as work from home is obviously more prevalent now. I think that in settings where mobility is important, like healthcare settings, you got physicians running around buildings and nurses. education, utilities, and kind of firefighters, police officers, things like that, where mobility is important. I think those are areas where you'll see more wearables and tablets and smartphones kind of fill the void, or even kind of fill an area where technology wasn't there prior. I think an important thing that we've gotten really involved in recently has been around the internet connectivity and how valuable that is to just communities and kind of the functioning of a modern society. So a lot of deficits in places like Cleveland, Detroit, Buffalo, and even major cities in some areas is that a lot of individuals are not connected to the internet. And so that has been something that has absolutely been a priority for us and a lot of the organizations we work with in the school districts. Is how do we get everybody that doesn't have access? It should be that easy. And it should just be a flip of a switch. There are complications there because the internet providers are structured a certain way, and there's a monopoly of 3 or 4 that really control that industry, and then the devices are expensive and the management around them is expensive. So a lot of effort is going into how do you develop a solution that is fit for kind of an average consumer, but is low cost and almost acts like a utility. So I think generally the trends are for hardware are in the corporate world. Mobility is a priority, work from home is a priority, but I don't think there's trends away from, no one's going to start using their smartphone versus their laptop computer, and but there are definitely more options and more ways to use technology, especially in the mobile heavy environments. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Michael, you spoke about artificial intelligence. How does Northeast Ohio rank with human intelligence and your ability to transition your workforce into these 3 amazing facilities and growth? Are you finding the talent? Do we have to grow it more, locally?
Yeah, I think I think Cleveland has incredible talent, and I think the trends I've been seeing, at least with my peers and friends of mine, is more and more of us are sticking around Cleveland or coming back to Cleveland or moving from big cities to smaller cities like Cleveland. And so I don't think there's a massive deficit of that type of talent. I think for us, we've put a lot of effort into basically banding our workforce. So we have very entry-level warehousing jobs. We have entry-level technical jobs. There's not a single entry point at MCPC that couldn't be trained to in a couple of months on the job. We don't have requirements for college degrees or certifications upon starting employment with us. A lot of it for the reason of we want to take people from a warehouse job or a device refurbishment job, something very entry level and not technical, and advance their skill set throughout their time with us. So even we started basically, I don't want to say profiling, but sort of categorizing people as maybe someone has incredible on the phone skills and personal skills, but maybe not heavy technical skills. That's a good tier 1 help desk type person that can answer phone calls, be personable, and we can train them on what to say and what to listen for and how to triage that phone call. But there's certain major skill sets that everybody has, and they fit in certain areas. We're lucky that we have a broad offering that in some parts is very advanced and sophisticated and does require a lot of certifications and degrees, but there's entry points in every division of our business that require none of that, but also allow you to kind of build your skills with us. So yeah, that's been, I think, maybe if MCPC was headquartered in Seattle or San Francisco, we'd build things a little bit differently in that regard. But I think, we reflect what Cleveland offers, really. And, it doesn't offer, a ton of technical people, but it offers a lot of hardworking people that are willing to commit to an organization and work hard to advance themselves. And so I think we've built a place that allows people to do that.
Thank you. I know Michael Cannon was thinking, can you build a defense for the Browns? But that might be a long stretch. What other questions we have as we wrap up this part of the meeting? Okay, well, I think we're going to move shortly to a breakouts, and hopefully as many of you can stay as possible, be broken out into groups by Doan. I did have one omission as I was doing introductions before. I apologize. I introduced Brendan Brain as a co-chair of membership. Brendan is also in a new position as the second vice chair. So what I've tried to do, and we've discussed with the executive board, is building succession over a number of years. I couldn't come up with anything more creative than second vice chair. So Brendan, maybe you can come up with a new title, but I was remiss in that. But it's good seeing a lot of new and familiar faces today. And I'm going to turn it over to Dawn to manage the breakout portion. And Dawn is our executive director. If you don't